Welcome to Am I Sleeping, where we tell a tale from the edge of consciousness. Today, we venture to a place where land meets the sea, where isolation breeds madness, and where some lights, no matter how old, were never meant to guide ships to safety. The Scary Lighthouse stands alone on a jagged outcrop 35 miles from the Scottish mainland. Built in 1895, it has weathered countless storms, guided thousands of ships, and according to local legend, the rolling wild sea surrounding it has claimed more than its fair share of souls. In November of 2019, electrical engineer Thomas Mercer received an urgent call. The lighthouse's automated system had malfunctioned due to a particularly violent storm. And with the weather worsening, the shipping routes in danger, someone needed to make repairs immediately. Thomas wasn't superstitious. 15 years working on offshore oil rigs had cured him of any romantic notions about the sea. It was just another job. A quick, overnight stay to replace some circuit boards, and then back to the mainland. The journey was treacherous. Waves crashed over the small vessel as it approached the lighthouse. The captain, an old man with weathered skin and eyes that had an all-too-knowing stare, looked directly at the tower for a moment, then back at Thomas, who was now placing his bags by his feet on the stone pier. "I'll be back tomorrow noon," he shouted over the storm. "Weather permitting." Thomas nodded, grabbing his tools and supply bag. "One more thing," the captain added, his voice suddenly grave. "Stay in the service rooms. The old keeper's quarters are unsafe. Structural issues." Thomas felt this was strange. He hadn't been warned of these rooms up until now. But he made his way to the lighthouse and opened the wooden door. The lighthouse interior was cold but dry. Thomas quickly located the control room and began diagnosing the electrical failure. It was worse than expected. The main control board was completely fried. Likely from a lightning strike, he thought. He had the parts, but it would take a few hours of careful work. But Thomas could hear a storm building outside, and the crash of waves rumbling through the ground. As night fell, the storm intensified. Rain lashed against the windows, while thunder shook the very foundations of the lighthouse. Thomas worked methodically, trying to ignore the strange acoustics of the tower. Like sometimes, how the wind seemed to form words. "The light must never go out." He tried to shrug this off, but later on, the creaking of metal sounded like footsteps on the spiral staircase. At midnight, the repairs were complete. Thomas activated the system, and the powerful beam once again cut through the darkness, sweeping across the churning seas below. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before preparing a simple meal from his supplies. But that was when he noticed the door. It was set into the wall behind the control panel. A small wooden door with peeling paint and an antique brass handle. The keeper's quarters, Thomas presumed. the ones he had been warned not to enter. But something was wrong. The hairs on Thomas's neck stood on end. The door was slightly ajar, and a cold draft emanated from within. But more concerning was the water. Small puddles had formed at the threshold, as if someone had recently entered, dripping wet from the storm. Thomas knew he should ignore it, but engineers are curious by nature, and he told himself he was simply being thorough, checking for leaks that might affect electrical systems, which would lead him to being called out again. He placed a hand on the cold brass handle and pulled the door open, which swung surprisingly easily. Inside, the keeper's quarters were well preserved. A small bed with neatly folded blankets, a writing desk with the old logbook, a shelf with books, their pages warped from the humidity. Everything covered with a thin layer of dust, except for a trail of wet footprints leading to the desk. Thomas followed the footprints, walking over, picking up an open logbook. It was the final entry, dated October 17, 1975. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible. "It's been weeks since William and Patterson disappeared. The storm won't stop. I keep hearing them calling from the water. They want me to join them. They say I must keep the light burning forever. I've barricaded the door. But the water keeps coming in. They're coming up the stairs now. God forgive me from what I've done." Thomas felt the hairs rise on the back of his neck. The lighthouse had been automated since 1976. The official record stated that the last keeper had been evacuated safely. There was no mention of missing men. Thomas felt the hair rise on the back of his neck, and a churn in his stomach. The lighthouse had been automated since 1976. The official record stated that the last keeper had been evacuated safely. There was no mention of missing men. Suddenly, a gush of wind surprised Thomas. He dropped his flashlight. As it clattered to the floor, the light went out. In the darkness, he heard it. The unmistakable sound of wet footsteps slowly ascending the spiral staircase. Thomas fumbled for his phone, activating its flashlight. The weak beam barely lit the room, but it caught something in the doorway. Water was pooling inward from the hall. The footsteps were no longer just on the floor. They continued up the wall and across the ceiling. Impossible footprints, defying gravity, now circling him. Thomas tried to make a sound, but his voice was locked in terror. He ran back through the control room, down the spiral staircase, heart pounding, but with each level he descended, the sound of water grew louder, and by the time he reached the ground floor, he was wading through ankle-deep seawater. The front door was locked. Not just locked, but sealed, as if it had been underwater for decades. The metal fused with corrosion. Thomas turned, ready to find another exit, when he saw them. 3 figures stood on the staircase. Their clothes were tattered, remnants of keepers' uniforms, their skin pale and bloated. Water streamed constantly from their bodies, and their eyes were replaced by small glowing lights, like lamplight, like miniature versions of lighthouse beams. The tallest figure spoke. Its voice was like water rushing through a broken pipe. The light must never go out. Someone must always tend to the light. 2 days later, when the storm finally subsided, the captain returned with his vessel to the lighthouse. He found everything in perfect working order. The electrical system functioned flawlessly. The lighthouse beams swept powerfully across the now calm waters. Of Thomas Mercer, there was no sign. Only his tools remained, neatly packed in their cases by the door. The captain made his report. Engineer missing, presumed swept away by a storm. Tragic accident. The lighthouse would need a new maintenance schedule assigned. As the boat pulled away, the captain glanced back one last time. He could have sworn he saw a figure in the lantern room, watching him leave. A figure that raised a hand in farewell, water streaming from its sleeve. But what troubled him most was what he found in the logbook. A new entry, dated November 2019, written in handwriting he didn't recognize. The light must never go out. I understand that now. Williams, Patterson and Gregory, they have shown me what happens when the light fails. So many ships, so many souls lost because we failed in our duty. I will not fail. I will keep the light burning forever. The entry was signed, Thomas Mercer, lighthouse keeper. And below that, a postscript that chilled the captain's blood. The others say we need one more. The lighthouse always needs 4 keepers. When the next storm comes, send someone, anyone. The light must never go out. The Sewell-Skerry Lighthouse continues to operate flawlessly to this day. Maintenance crews are now sent in teams of 3, and only during clear weather. They report nothing unusual, except that sometimes, when the wind is right, they hear voices in the spiral staircase, counting 1, 2, 3. We need just one more. If you enjoyed this tale of maritime horror, make sure to like and subscribe to Am I Sleeping? Leave a comment below, telling me what lighthouse you'd never want to be trapped in during a storm. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.